This video will not contain spoilers for the 2026 Star Fox. With Star Fox on the cusp of wide release, the credits have leaked, and so it's time to look at who exactly is behind the first fully new Star Fox title in a decade. Is there any evidence to suggest that a new Star Fox team is gearing up, or will Star Fox potentially remain an afterthought for Nintendo for some time to come? As previously announced, the title was developed by Velan Studios, who partnered with Nintendo once before on 2020's Mario Kart Live Home Circuit, a concept they themselves pitched, while many of the people at the studio hailed from Vicarious Visions, which spent a good amount of time developing a new 3D Donkey Kong in the 2010s before the project was ultimately quashed. Game director Dan Duptis previously worked on Mario Kart Live Home Circuit as the director and also directed Hot Wheels Rally. Largely, this is, I'm sure, a product of Velan being a relatively small studio, and so the same directors working on multiple projects. But I wonder if there may be an element of Nintendo valuing a trusted relationship with an existing director, causing Duptis to return for the second Nintendo-facing game. Evidently, there's a large number of talented people from Velan, and I'm really glad to see that the studio, which suffered layoffs recently, has found what will hopefully be a highly effective utilization of their talents and perhaps the start of a deeper, longer relationship with Nintendo on many future projects. From what I can see, they appear to have done an amazing job, and I'm really looking forward to playing the game. There are other studios credited as well. Notably, Waterproof Studios are once again contracted by Nintendo after their work on several recent Nintendo titles doing work related to game movies. So Mario Strikers Battle League, Mario vs. Donkey Kong, and Metroid Prime 4 Beyond all had contributions from Waterproof Studios. What these titles have in common, of course, is that they are the most recent projects from their Western studios which would require animation. I think it's probably safe to assume that Waterproof Studios, who have also been credited on Hogwarts Legacy and Mortal Kombat 1, will also be collaborators for Luigi's Mansion 4 and other projects from Nintendo Software Technology, Retro Studios, Next Level Games, and indeed Velan. In fact, while a lot of people talk about different potential acquisitions for Nintendo, it does seem to me that this might be the kind of studio that Nintendo might seek to acquire in the future, as it does need some kind of Western-based animation assistance, given that Nintendo Pictures is based in Japan, and so for any games which require English voice acting, this might not be ideal. This is also Nintendo's first collaboration that I can find with motion capture studio Beyond Performance Capture Inc. The music was recorded at Abbey Road Studios, presumably the Abbey Road Studios, although Nintendo also used Abbey Road for Bayonetta 3, so it's not quite the first time that we have seen them credited on a Nintendo title. The orchestra recording supervisor, of course, is the composer of the original Star Fox 64, Hajime Wakai, who actually, as far as I can tell, debuted with the original 64 in terms of his Nintendo credits, although even now he's far more famous as the sound supervisor or music director on the Zelda series for the majority of the mainline games since Skyward Sword. In terms of voice acting, they've dubbed it into English, Brazilian, Portuguese, Japanese, French, Spanish of both Latin American and European versions, Italian, German, Dutch, Korean, and Chinese. Now, it's not completely shocking for Nintendo to make this available in a large range of languages, but it's nevertheless a fairly significant outlay for the casting and dubbing of so many versions, when in the past they've tended to keep to just one or two languages. I guess this is a particular problem for Star Fox, where you really need to hear the language alongside the action, so you don't need to break focus and read text. And so I guess the recording stints were probably shorter than would be the case on, let's say, the Xenoblade games, where I believe there's usually just Japanese and English versions, and so I guess it would make sense to try to do more of the different languages and give it a bigger worldwide launch, in particular since this is a title which has never quite appealed so much in Japan compared to the West, and so perhaps they feel that getting it into as many territories as possible might reveal different places where it could have a greater impact going forward. Nevertheless, that's a decent upfront investment in Star Fox with translators, cast, directors, audio engineers, and quality assurance for all of these different languages. Mario Club is credited with the Asian localization and testing, while Nintendo handled the Japanese localization, rather opposite from the way around this would usually happen. The credited Japanese translator is Nanami Tsurata, who has formed doing this kind of work, having received localization, text supervisor, or special thanks credits on other Western developed games like Mario vs. Donkey Kong, F-Zero 99, Mario, and Rabbids Sparks of Hope, and good job, as well as coordinating the decidedly Tokyo-based Super Mario Party Jamboree. Terata is also credited as a coordinator on this game as well. There is a team of artists at Nintendo, and although it's not completely clear if they're seniority led, the top credit is Hayato Iwasako, whose first game I can see credited with was 2018's Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and Iwasako also recently worked on Mario Tennis Visa and Super Mario Party Jamboree. Some of the artists have other experience on Western games. Mikio Yamamoto was also on Metroid Prime 4 Beyond and F-Zero 99, while Yu Yamamoto worked on Metroid Prime Remastered and Mario Plus Rapid Sparks of Hope. But in general, all of these people seem to be utility players who have credits on most recent titles you could name, from Bonanza to Wonder to Yoshi to Mario Tennis, and not one of them, as far as I can see, has ever worked on a Star Fox game previously. The special thanks credits are also interesting. Miyamoto tops the list, of course, and Koji Kondo is second, neither needing much introduction. The rest seem to relate to audio production or assist studios. Returning for the first time since he was the graphic designer on Star Fox 64 is graphics supervisor Satoru Tazekawa, who in recent years has been the art director on the Zelda series, although he also kibitzed supporting Mario Kart World. Takahiro Dota, the head of the technical team, is the technical supervisor, which isn't enormously surprising given that he seems to be across a lot of different projects, while Mitsuhiro Takano was the text supervisor. Intriguingly, his first credit as far as I can tell, since he coordinated 2016's Tank Troopers, and I guess perhaps he was involved with shepherding the smaller games for the 3DS, and once that effectively wound up in the late 2010s, he's now transitioned into a different role. The coordinator credits include the aforementioned Nanami Terata, as well as Yusun Luo, for whom this game is the third credit I can find after the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Course Pass and Super Mario Party Jamboree, and then Misaki Hiraga of Super Mario Party Jamboree, who has good experience of working with smaller Western studios, having coordinated Snipper Clips and the Stretchers previously. The overall project manager is Toyokazu Nanaka, who supervises an awful lot of work outside Japan. He was also the producer or project manager on Air Riders Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, Mario Tennis Fever, Pocopia, and Yoshi and the Mysterious Book just in the last year. In fact, the whole producer bracket is filled with people from the general external-facing producing groups, such as Shinya Saito and Masahiro Shiotani, although there is an incredibly rare credit for Yoshiaki Koizumi himself, who, since his promotion, hasn't had a credit even on Donkey Kong Bonanza, where we know from interviews he was definitely a big part of the game's inception. That does suggest that Koizumi himself put a particular amount of attention and interest into this specific game, which is kind of interesting. I suspect in this case it was to do, given the way he introduced it during the direct, with the voice functionality for Game Chat, but I guess we might have to wait and see if there's a developer interview for that. However, what I always look for on these titles is the person or small group in overall charge of supervising development and keeping to Nintendo's vision. While a lot is evidently a responsibility of the developers themselves, it's very clear from interviews around titles like Metroid Dread, developed by Mercury Steam in Spain, and Luigi's Mansion, developed by the Canadian Next Level Games, that the core Japanese staff are absolutely vital in providing direction and refinement and driving the core concepts of those titles. Despite being built in Spain, Dread is clearly a Sakamoto game to its fingertips. Here, the game design supervisor is none other than Yusuke Amano. Now, Amano isn't anyone with deep past Star Fox experience, but he was the coordinator of Star Fox 64 3D. He has been at Nintendo for more than 20 years, starting on Brain Training, but is most famous as the co-creator of Splatoon, and indeed as a director on Splatoon, Splatoon 2, and the Octo expansion, although not, interestingly, Splatoon 3. Also, for those who follow the channel, I identified 4 potential people behind a new Star Fox, and Amano was one, although at the time I wasn't necessarily picturing something quite so reverential, and so it's interesting that he has taken on this project just the same. The fact is, though, a lot of past Star Fox experience remains untapped here. Yasuyuki Oyagi, who is the co-producer of the Booster Course Pass and is currently someone whose next project, assuming he's still at Nintendo, I'm extremely interested to see, was someone who I put as an outside pick, given that back in the original Star Fox 64, he was the course designer for the game. I do expect to see a credit from him pretty soon, unless of course he's left the company, but all the same, he's not on here. My hunch is that Iyagi, a long-time senior supervisor in the Mario Kart Group EPT9, will be shepherding some kind of side project from that team that was developed alongside Mario Kart World. Not ARMS, the core dev team of that were on World, but potentially Nintendogs, where he was previously a director, and potentially even something brand new. Also absent here, though, is EPD9's Yugo Hayashi, who was the planning lead on Mario Kart World after all, but despite this, he had previously been in the Star Fox team for Battle for Atlas and was the director of both Star Fox Zero and Star Fox Guard. It seems Zero was enough to scare him off of Star Fox, for now at least. Another absentee appearing on Special Thanks, but not as a general producer, is Shigeru Miyamoto. This might not sound overly surprising, as he's a decade on from being a regular game developer in any sense, but in fact Miyamoto has had a few credits over recent years as a supervisor or even a general producer on titles like Mario Tennis Fever, Mario & Luigi Brothership, Pikmin 4, and F-Zero 99. His absence from this project suggests that while he loves Star Fox, this probably wasn't really the top of his mind, and indeed I rather suspect that it might have been Koizumi more than Miyamoto who was driving the development here. What this reveals is that Star Fox simply is not in the same category that other Nintendo properties are in. With Metroid, we could, until now at least as he likely retired, look to Sakamoto. With Animal Crossing, there's Eya Kigoku. With Zelda, Aonuma, as well as Fujibayashi and Iwamoto. There are lots of senior figures who have deep experience with Mario, but there just isn't a Star Fox brains trust in the same way. Still, if you were to have someone hold the Star Fox portfolio, you really couldn't do much better than Yusuke Amano. Still in his mid-40s and with plenty of shooter experience through Splatoon, he is clearly one of Nintendo's development superstars, and yet his credits have been thin on the ground of late. He was not credited, as I say, on Splatoon 3. He was a planning supervisor on Animal Crossing New Horizons, but Star Fox will be his first title released for a while. That said, he was also credited on a patent linked to the mysterious playtest game that was previewed for brief windows in 2024 and 2025. If I had to guess, his role at Nintendo for quite a while now has been more to develop innovative gameplay approaches, and while Splatoon was the first of these projects to produce fruit, it probably won't be the last. If Amano decides to build a team around Star Fox to shepherd future titles, you have to imagine that these would be people who are going to try to come at it with quite an original perspective. However, it might also be that he simply had the most pertinent experience after Star Fox 64 3D, and that he won't in fact be leading future entries since he's never actually produced an original Star Fox, and my guess from his credits history is that rehashing an old property may not be where his priorities lie, although that's not to say he might not have a watching brief on the series as a senior producer of the company. Basically then, Nintendo has leaned on its most experienced teams dealing with outside developers, and particularly Western developers on the game, and they've had quite a bit of special overseeing from Yoshiki Koizumi, plus the particularly talented oversight of Yosuke Amano. But in many respects, the credits are actually a disappointment for Star Fox fans hoping to see the germ of a new coherent team in this game. The team structure resembles most outsourced games from Nintendo, ones that they take to trusted studios like Mario Tennis and let them get on with it, rather than titles like Luigi's Mansion and Zelda, which are clearly near and dear to the heart of Kyoto creatives, even if other studios are notionally responsible for the development. Ultimately, what the title absolutely doesn't have here is a clear skeleton of a new future Japanese team who will be the core hub of Nintendo's Star Fox development. If anything, you have to question whether this might ultimately come not from within Japan, but from the American side, and whether it could be that someone at Nintendo Software Technology, or even just at Nintendo of America themselves, end up being the key link person for the game. What can we infer from all this then? Well, firstly, it's probably true that the game was a reaction to the initiative, apparently, of Illumination to try and put Star Fox into the film. From there, the obvious thing to do would be to commission a new Star Fox game, or at least to recommission an old game in a new chassis, and so the priority here was probably just getting the project delivered on time and on budget, rather than sweating every single detail. After all, this isn't a new Star Fox. It's also completely possible that some of the people who worked here in more junior roles will be asked to take the series on going forward. Nintendo seems to have quite a fluid approach to these job roles, and supervisors, coordinators, and directors often flow between taking on different roles. Metroid Dread director Fumi Hayashi started in the marketing department after all. Yu Senluo, who by all accounts seems to be on the younger side, given that the only credits we can see for Luo are on the Booster Course Pass and as a coordinator on Super Mario Party Jamboree, well, it might be that this is the kind of person, someone who's worked as a planner and as a coordinator, who could ultimately be tasked with taking a property like Star Fox forward. It would be a big promotion in a sense, but also the kind of project that someone could work on while they are relatively young at the company. My guess is that a young supervisor and planner with connections at EPD4 and EPD9 would be exactly the kind of person suited to shepherding a more fully featured future project, which took Star Fox and tried to develop it for a new generation. Of course, this does open the question of what Nintendo might do next, if not a fully featured original title. Do they give the remake treatment to Assault or Adventures, or, if they're really bold, what about Star Fox 2 from the Super Nintendo? Based on these credits, I'm considerably more skeptical about an imminent original Star Fox, but I could certainly see more ambitious and extensive new versions of old games being a stepping stone over a matter of years, perhaps over a decade, towards another full new Star Fox someday in the future. I won't put these into forecasting terms right now, as I dare say I will cycle back to this topic in the future after giving it some more thought, but at any rate, do check out the Patreon for a short exclusive video that I would have run today were it not for being able to track down the credits a little earlier than I expected, as well as various other good stuff on there in terms of early ad-free and exclusive content. Thanks to everyone for watching, liking, hyping, sharing and subscribing, all that good stuff, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time for another Nintendo Forecast.